quickly through this presentation and talk about stuff to give you some context so you know what was supposed to be in presentation. Then you can find it online, maybe read it through, find some details. But given that I have two human beings, it would be awesome to customize the message so at least I can bring some value to you. So if you could say a couple of words about your profession or what have you expected from this meetup, that would be fantastic. Much easier for me to bring some value to you.
I said I have no expectations, so which is a surprise. And my background is like I'm a computer science / economics guy.
I see.
So I have like an overview about everything.
Okay.
I'm not an expert of like security.
Gotcha. Okay. So you want to start your own business, kind of?
Yeah, I had 2 startups or 3 startups.
Okay.
Now I'm head of innovation on the biggest software community.
Okay. Awesome. And what do you do?
I'm a student, TU Berlin here.
Okay.
Major in cloud computing and distributed systems and minor in entrepreneurship.
Uh-huh.
So, as I said, 90% coder and crypto enthusiast and
Right.
10% wanna be entrepreneur.
So these days you can actually study entrepreneurship instead of running a business and learning it that way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. That's fantastic. So someone created a great business out of people that want to learn how to run business. So they educate you, you pay them money. That's fantastic. Yeah. Practicality, let's say. Yeah.
The last time I met people which studied entrepreneurship, I asked them if they also can study football. So you play football, you should study how to play football. They didn't like the joke. I don't know why.
Right. So it's like you can start going to the gym, or you can go to the gym. So it's like, yeah, you can read about making push-ups, doing push-ups, but you are not going to get a six-pack out of reading about it, I guess. I don't know who am I to tell, right?
I'm thinking what we try to say is you should do it by, you should just do it, but you always probably nobody has the degree, so you also find that. Okay,
right. So let's go quickly through some of the things. If you want to ask about something specifically, just let me know. I can stop. We can have QA immediately when you have a question. So I'm Cybersecurity Director at TestArmy. We run penetration tests. We run SDLC consultancy. We help companies essentially how to understand how to build secure products, how to build secure infrastructure, and how to secure their data. So the common goal for today's presentation was how to actually help those customers of ours and other people around the globe build their businesses so they don't get punished for running a business. With GDPR, it's easy, very easy to get punished for having an interest in running a profitable business. Because if you have customers, I assume you are somehow profitable. You should be at least. Who am I to tell? I haven't studied entrepreneurship, but you are supposed to be profitable when you have customers. And with GDPR, there is a lot of emphasis, how do you protect customers' data? If you don't do a good enough job in protecting customers' data, you can get actually punished by European Union, which is fine because they've created this regulation for a good reason. They want to protect our data, they want to protect customers' data because we had so many leakages that we cannot handle it anymore. Like no one, not a single person of us have ever said, yeah, I wish there was more data leakages. No one ever said that. So there is that. And I work for these companies, but it doesn't really matter. And with those companies, actually, yeah. It's all about partnership. So when it comes to GDPR and ensuring security, everyone talks about security. So let's buy this type of firewall. Let's buy this solution for software scanning. Let's run those scanners to actually do something and to secure our organization. And it doesn't really work that way. Especially when we are talking about humans who are supposed to protect some data, govern some data, and about humans who put some data into our account, then we cannot secure it all if we haven't educated people. So what I'm trying to say is that everywhere you go, when you hear something about cybersecurity, security, application security, it's all focused on technology. How to secure the code base, how to find bugs. Why couldn't we think of a way to actually educating people so they don't make this mistake in the first place? So it's it's all about mindset and education and switching it a bit, shifting it a bit.
The user, or want you educate the programmer?
Both, everyone. Every single entity that interacts with your application in your business should be educated. Obviously, there need to be some context for this education. So you are not going to, you're not going to be teaching your user how to write code securely, but you can teach your user how to use your product securely, so they don't get exposed.
But why why do you think people care about security, like users care about security?
Why users care about security?
Yeah.
For various reasons. Corporate users care a lot because if you are, for example, enterprise file signature vendor, like let's say Dropbox or Box for business, you put there your invoices of your employees, of your contractors, companies that collaborate with you. You obviously don't want that data to be leaked, do you? Probably not.
I think it's by German law forbidden to put your HR data on Dropbox.
Once again?
I think it's forbidden by German law to put your HR data on Dropbox.
Sure, Dropbox is such an example, right? But in Dropbox for business and Box for business,
So
other solutions, yeah.
As company, not as B2C.
Once again?
We see the user more as company, not as
Not really.
customer.
Just an example about corporate customers. So you have corporate customers that
But the
come.
customer is always a corporate, not the
No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is a couple of reasons why end user cares about security. If you have corporate user, they care because they don't want the data to be leaked. If you create an application, you push it to GitHub, you don't want that to leak somewhere. And there is also individual user and someone who doesn't want their privacy to be breached, for example, in Facebook. So you create connections on Facebook, LinkedIn, other applications, Badoo, Tinder, whatever you prefer. You talk to people, you do various things on these platforms, and likely you do not want to get exposed for that. What's private should remain private, unless you make it public. But when you create a password for a service, then I guess you want it to be private, one way or another.
Because the problem is if you see the most people on Facebook,
Right.
they don't give a shit about it.
Kind of, but that's only part of the
They're
picture.
not aware of the issue.
Kind of, yes. But if you had asked these people, hey, do you want your private messages to be leaked? Then they would probably have some issues with that. Yeah. So let's say, okay, I agree with that statement that people publish too much data about their own lives for various reasons. Often they regret it in the future, so they hook up with someone else and the other person looks in the past and was like, whoa, who I'm with now. Or they go to some weird places, they regret publishing some data, they get anxious publicly, they curse publicly and all that stuff. So that's not for their image and for their own feeling in the future. But when it comes to private messages, that's a huge deal. Like
For example, like Sony and Yahoo
Right.
lost their whole database, I think, like their whole user database.
Yes, many companies had, yes.
So we have also this issue. So should not be the reason to educate them more that like you can't trust anyone and then like
Right, but that's kind of nihilistic point of view and approach to life. So you tell people, hey, don't use anything and nothing makes sense anymore. There's no reason to do any of those things. So it's like, we can balance it. So why would we ever tell people you shouldn't be using those platforms because everything is insecure if we can actually teach them and educate them how they can keep their data safer? So if you create any type of application and you are a small business, let's say you want to create some business. So you created your startup, right? You have 1 to 5 customers, small customers. When a breach happens to you and you don't have this huge reputation, you don't have all those brands trusting you, no one is talking really about you, and there is a data leakage, those customers can very easily lose trust for you. Because why would they stick with you if you have failed them, even though they gave you a trust, although you are a small startup? There is so much competition in IT space that they don't need to hang out with you. They can go to other company. So there is a lot of business incentives, and there is a lot of incentives for individuals. Privacy, mostly. Privacy, online banking, we could say, hey, don't trust anything. Okay, but what about mobile payments and online payments? That's troubling. We like that. We like when we can go to the shop and click on mobile phone, okay, it's paid. That's cool. That works for people. So rather than going through the direction, let's get back to the caves. Let's go to the skyscrapers and just educate people how not to fall down. That's one of the approach, obviously. It depends what you are building and what's your mission in life. If you are a user and you don't care about that, that's awesome. But if you are building an application, if you are creating software, and generally people create software because they want other people to use it, then you should take into consideration that they may be a user that you can lose if you don't have those security constraints. So that's one thing. And with GDPR, it's not freedom of choice anymore. You cannot say, well, I don't care about privacy. I don't care about data. If you have a running business, if you have an application, it doesn't need to be a business. If you have an application that's storing any type of data of other people, that's a problem. You need to take this into consideration because fines go pretty high. If you don't take care about this, there are two things that may happen. One is that you will be punished by GDPR. You may be punished if they figure it out that something happened to you. And the other side is your reputation may be hurt really bad. If you created something, you convince people to come to you, use your product, and then they've lost their data or money. Let's use money. Money is much more important to many people than privacy. It's like, oh, okay, someone can read my private messages with my relatives and other people. That's cool. But if you say to them, hey, so if someone breaks into your computer because you're using insecure software, because the company that produced this software had thought that, why care about security? And because of that company that had produced insecure software that you have installed, now someone can breach your banking account. That's tangible, right? Makes sense?
How much hacking is going on?
Once again?
How much hacking is going on?
A lot.
So we don't see it, or there's not in the news because it's not interesting enough, or?
It's all over the news.
Not as often as I would expect it.
Right, yes.
Is probably the only one.
Yes.
Maybe the American election one, and then before the Sony hack.
There was also this case that Russians break into the German government.
Yeah, but it was kind of overhyped because they only, like, as I looked deeper into it, it was not so critical. So they got only one computer. They were really sure that they didn't got the whole network, so they got only one. Like it was hyped more by the news than it was, at least what I read.
Okay. Because I was reading, they went through the diplomacy school of the foreign ministry, and it was like they had problems to even find out that they were hacked.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. I can't remember what the source was of mine. So, but like, it's usually hacking is illegal, I would say.
It is.
It is.
Criminal.
Unethical hacking, yes, is illegal.
But if you would make it legal, you could probably raise the whole security issue with that, right? If the companies would starting to hack each other, it would raise the overall security level.
It's already happening, actually.
Okay.
So what we do, our company, is actually offering ethical hacking services. So we come to your company, we test your services, product, infrastructure, your people, and we tell you, so hey, so these are our findings. We found some holes, and it's cool we found them. But what if someone else had found them, extorted the data, published over the internet, sold on the dark market, or create a viral marketing campaign and create a black PR for you? So now people know how bad job you're doing in securing data of your customers. So we try to go after security holes first before bad guys do. That's essentially what companies like ours do. So this is the case. This is already happening.
Can you give a guarantee that like it will not happen?
No. Security, the whole security, cybersecurity space is all about minimizing the risks. You can never put a lock in your door that's going to be 100% proof, unless you create it so solid that even you cannot get into or out from your house. So we can increase safety of your application to 100%. Totally. No worries. But then that application is going to be isolated from the internet, obviously, because if we have 4 billion people with access to the internet, then you have potentially 5 billion people that may attack your application and try to abuse it. We can log it into your basement. We can plug it off from the power connection. Your application is going to be safe. But what benefit does it give to anyone if it's turned off? Yeah.
So, is there a central news site where you can find hackings? Like, is there a central newspaper which is just specialized on published hacking?
There is a bunch of them, yeah. So the good one is thehackersnews.com.
Okay.
They publish a lot of stuff. There is actually, if you just type in Google or DuckDuckGo, whatever you prefer, hacking news, you'll get plenty of good newspapers, online newspapers that share info about all those data breaches and security breaches.
Also, under the GDPR, companies have to report any security issues.
Okay.
So the regulators will keep the database of those issues, and they will be able to act upon the specific breaches. And this is the idea of the GDPR, basically, that there is more coordination between the institutions and the private companies that might be subject to the breach. Also, right now in the banking sector, for example, the banks are cooperating, even though they're competing in the market. They're cooperating on the security issues because this is one of the most important things for any business, to make sure that your customers are safe.
But how they can generate reports outside of standard, like it's probably possible for banks because they have security standards they need to hold.
Yep.
But how can a EU file report for all the other companies which are not standardized?
Well, there is no procedure for the moment to prepare such reports or to issue them publicly. But you were asking if there's any way to track those kind of breaches and to make sure that there is a central database of what's happening. So the idea of GDPR is that the regulators do have this their database. We don't know yet if this will be published to any user potentially, but at least there is a place where we can foresee that those authorities will be able to act upon it. This is to prevent the further breaches.
Yeah, so you can actually see here that there is a couple of ways you can minimize the consequences of the breach happening. So GDPR says, hey, so we must do something to not allow that many data breaches because it went far too far. But if it happens, because you cannot eliminate possibility of getting hacked to 100%, because there are so many ways of entrance that it's simply impossible. You cannot do this because it's not only about security of the code, it's about social engineering attacks that target an employee of organization. For example, sends a phishing mail to an employee opens it up, infects his own computer, their own computer, and then it spreads across the whole organization. So if you have organizations such as Google that's hiring over 50,000 people, then it's tough to secure it 100%, right? So
what is the most reason for leaks on a medium-sized company? So bigger-sized companies are more attractive to try more effort in to get in, like social engineering. But like for a standard hack in a standardized company, what's the average there? Or how do you get into it? What's the bigger, like what's the most common scenario there?
How what's the most of the way companies get hacked, right? That's the question.
Yeah, what's the average a normal sized company gets hacked? Because like it's sure for Google it makes sense to try social engineering to get in, but I'm probably not sure it's like it's a lower amount of hacks which are so much effort in to get in.
Right.
So what's the average hack on the average company? How does it look like?
Most often it's targeting the human element. So it would be precisely social engineering attacks. So you, for example, go by an office of some organization, you drop USB drives that are infected with malware, someone grabs USB drive, says, "Wow, free USB drive, let's see what's on it." And then it's infected. That's one of the common ways. You just send phishing link to the organization, to employees. They open it up. Let's say it's malicious Office file with macros that execute some code, and it's over. That's one of the ways. But yeah, social engineering attacks are most often ways of getting into organization. And then that's basically it at most organization. When it comes to securing human element, there's no difference between a big company and small company. There is totally no difference. But in small companies especially, there are other problems with technology. So small companies cannot afford to send employees to training, to train their employees how to write secure code. They cannot buy many solutions and fancy firewalls and other tooling to secure the code. Bigger companies have more assets to protect, more servers, more code and all that, but they have actually resources to buy all those security tools.
Maybe we can go with the presentation first and then do the questions, because we do like discussions time now.
Yeah, okay.
Right, okay. So let me get back to the second slide. Right, so what I wanted to say today was that public awareness focuses a lot on legal items related to GDPR. So we tell people, hey, you should do this and that to protect yourself. You should write, okay, so it's displaying, awesome. Consent's another way. You should allow people to withdraw their consent, to store data, to unsubscribe to your newsletter and all that stuff. You need to have an explicit consent, why you need the emails and all that. But we are not focusing enough on the technical aspects. So we are not telling companies that it's not only about avoiding those legal items, but it's also about protecting your infrastructure. So when the actual security breach happens, the fines are minimized. So with GDPR, if you get hacked, it may not be end of your business, assuming that you had actually put in some work to secure organization. So if you had done something, then they'll look at you favorably. So they'll be like, okay, they've tried. We know that you cannot protect your company 100%, but they've done something, which is cool, and let's see how much they've done. So in the news, you are not going to hear that much about all those things because you're not fancy enough. There's not enough money in it. And people don't realize that by implementing technical countermeasures, they can secure their organization against GDPR. So for example, we have one of those requirements in GDPR that say you must make sure that someone has no way, an external attacker has no way of accessing the data of your customers, but that's not all it says. This one bullet point in GDPR is saying no one else can access the document, but also those documents that customer uploaded must be there. They cannot vanish in no time. They cannot disappear out of the blue. They must be stored there, so when customers go to your website, they actually fetch the data they've pushed in. So you've heard about, have you heard about ransomware attacks? Ransomware attacks, okay. So
it's like the logging of the PC with encrypting it and then
precisely, yes. So you have malicious software in your PC that's encrypting your drives and pretty much renders your computer useless unless you pay a ransom, pay it to the company that's to some entrepreneur, black hat entrepreneur that's encrypted your drive, and you have no access. Essentially, you have no access to the data. So if you have no access to the data, and they haven't accessed that data really, they haven't extorted that data, you may be still punished by GDPR because your customers have no access to the data they've pushed to your database. So that's a problem. And also, GDPR authority may assume that if someone was capable of encrypting your drives, they had their hands on your data. Even if you cannot prove they extorted that data, there is no audit logs and all that stuff that explicitly say, okay, someone extorted our data. If someone was able to access your machine with so huge privileges that they were able to install ransomware software, then all bets are off. You probably lost your data. Your users lost privacy to their data, so that's a problem. And there is a couple of things you can do to protect yourself against ransomware infections, like update your stuff, don't install random software, don't install pirated software, make sure that you have strong passwords so someone cannot log into your database server and just encrypt your stuff or delete your data. And that's cool, yes.
So most attacks on ransomware was like on old computers.
Yep.
Is it not more valuable for the attackers to just sell the privacy data directly and not ransom your computers?
They can do both, so why not do both?
Okay.
They may extort your data, sell it on the black market, but they can also encrypt the data, so your company cannot run the business and they still need to pay you, so you get money twice. That makes sense? So when you see somewhere, hey, so how do we protect our company from ransomware attacks? And they give you this list, but what they don't tell you enough is what if actually infection was successful? So what if someone was able to access your infrastructure? So always assume the worst and prepare for the greatest. So if you have a company, you innovate, you build software, you build stuff, you develop your product, but you must keep in the back of your head an opportunity that someone is coming after your data and someone is going to breach your security. And when that happens, and eventually it will happen to most companies, it happened for companies like Facebook, Google, Uber, most companies that you know and products of whom you use on daily basis. So if those great organizations got hacked with so many resources they have, most companies is going to be hacked one day or another. And then the question is, can I do something to minimize the consequences, the bad consequences of us getting breached? And there actually are many. So you can do all those great things to protect yourself against ransomware infection, but you can also make many things, plenty of things, to minimize the damage. So if you perform daily backups of your infrastructure or database, customers' data and all that stuff, and there is a ransomware infection that encrypts all your data, then what can you do? You can pay the ransom, get unencrypted data. That's cool, that makes sense. Or you can just revert the backups, clean your servers to the ground, install data from the backups, and that's done. And you have maybe a loss of 1 day of data instead of loss of your business. So that's cool. And in terms of the GDPR, that's important because I'll get back to this one. Because GDPR says about those 10 bullet points that will decrease the penalty they're going to put on you after the data breach. So if you had actually good data backups, you were able to recover quickly because you've used those backups, you've tested them previously, they worked, then GDPR is not going to fine you that much compared to how much they would fine you if you haven't had those backups in place. So yeah, certainly they're going to punish you because you had ransomware infection, but on the other hand, it's going to be much lower price tag because you allowed your customers to get access to the data quickly after the breach. And there is plenty of things that could be done, and they're here. And speaking of ransom, we used to think that ransomware was one of the greatest worst things that happened to the security industry, greatest in terms of size, because you go to the company, you encrypt their data, they need to pay you a ransom. But in case of companies such as Uber, they really test their backups. So it's hard to do damage to such company by just deploying ransomware. You will certainly do some damage, but why deploy ransomware if you can demand a ransom from Uber for not disclosing any information that Uber was breached? That's something interesting. In 2016, Uber paid $100,000 to hackers, so they did not publicly disclose information that they had extorted 57 million records from Uber's database. Now with GDPR, there is one more incentive for hackers, black hat hackers. Previously, they had to extort the data, encrypt the data, deploy ransom, do some damage to the company. And then they expected company to, for example, buy decryption keys, or they've sold that data on the dark market and all that stuff. But that's still risky even for black hat hackers. When they extort the data and they push it on the black market, they don't know who's going to buy it. And if it's not FBI on the other side. So there is a risk involved. If you hack a company and you contact that company and tell them, hey Uber, so I've fetched 57 million of records from the databases. I can sell it, that's one thing, and I can also publish it to the news. With GDPR, the fine for Uber would be huge. For that many records, the company could potentially go down for such an abuse. There are limits for the fines, but in such huge incident, they could go down a lot. So GDPR is cool because it protects us, the customers. But if you're running a business, then you should implement more safeguards, because there may be a case when hackers use GDPR as a leverage to just blackmail you. Hey, so pay us money. Otherwise, we're going to report it to GDPR authority that you were breached, that you put our hands on your data, which is troubling. And when you negotiate with terrorists, then what's the expected outcome? You expect they're going to go away, but why would they go away if they can blackmail you once again? So that's a huge problem. And that's something I expect we are going to see with GDPR, that hackers are going to go smart about this. Because now they can actually earn money twice. It was double, so you can sell it on the black market, you can encrypt the data and get ransom, and now with GDPR, you can sell the data on the dark market, you can get money to from ransomware to give those companies decryption keys, and also you can blackmail them that, hey, you either pay us money or we are going to report you to GDPR authorities. And for some companies, it may be cheaper to pay terrorists instead of fighting with them. Yep, go ahead.
And they should blindly trust the terrorist that he's not going to do what he promised not to do, right? That's not what happens most of the time.
Right, absolutely. Yes,
You
yes.
buy the encryption key and they disappear, or you buy like the silence and they pick up, or?
So actually, most of the ransomware business actually works, because black hat hackers figured out that if I encrypt computers at 100 companies, and I ask for ransom, one company buys key, and it turns out that those keys don't work, they are going to write it in social media, and they are going to make a press release, hey, we've bought encryption keys, we paid the ransom, but we still cannot decrypt the data. So what other companies are going to do about that? They are not going to pay ransom, because they already know that it's not going to work anyways. So if hackers created a solution and the ransomware works such a way that they can actually recover the data, then all businesses know, okay, so if I pay the money, I'm going to get the data back. So it works. That's something that works most of the time. You pay the money, you get the decryption keys. But you don't know what's going to work is blackmailing. Because today I may blackmail you from this email address and say, hey, so I just learned that you were hacked. Pay me money or I'm going to disclose this. And then a week after, another person may blackmail you, hey, so I've heard from my buddy that you were breached and I have some proof of concept for that. I have some proofs for that. And you cannot play that game all the time. But some companies may fall into this, may run into the situation when they actually believe that they can trust terrorists. So that's something to think about, and you can either expect and hope that it's not going to happen, or you may assume that you are going to be breached, the data is going to be leaked, and you are going to be punished by GDPR, But by following the best practices, which are here, you can minimize the penalty. So you can either hope, and hope isn't the best strategy for running a business, or you can actually do something about this. And if you're a software company, there is a couple of things you can do to make your software better. So obviously there is an education part and all that stuff, but in 2002, Microsoft released how they secure their software. With Windows 2003, the number of bugs compared to the previous distributions went much lower. So they were able to catch many security issues before they went public. Internally, they had such a great quality assurance process by implementing so-called Secure SDLC, Secure Software Development Lifecycle. So what do? They educate their employees how to write code securely. They test their products and infrastructure on a continuous basis internally. They test it in QA, staging, and production. They hire external companies to test their products. They automate all this stuff, and then they scan the software continuously when it's out there. And they also hire bug bounty hunters to ethical hackers from all around the world in crowd testing form to test their products before bad guys do. So there is a concept called Secure SDLC that actually walks you through how to protect your code base, your products, your applications, your infrastructure, all that stuff. So why I'm saying this and why I'm showing this example is because GDPR authority is going to take this into consideration. If you're running a software business, you're creating application, you are building products, and you've implemented at least some of the points of Secure SDLC, they look at you and say, okay, they've tried something. So that's the decision you must make. How much money I'm going to invest, how many resources I'm going to invest to protect myself against hackers, and how much money I'm going to invest in protecting myself once the breach happens, because it's going to happen eventually. Or you may just say, you only live once and who cares about that, right? There is also a concept called DevSecOps. You know DevOps, right? You know Agile. So DevSecOps is essentially DevOps-ish and Agile-ish way to security. So you just embed security testing processes and security education into Agile and DevOps to make sure that every single person involved in security testing, in software development, has some knowledge about security, how to write code securely, how to deploy code securely, to make sure that everyone actually is involved. So every single person in your company knows about basics of security. So if someone tries to drop some malicious USB drives in front of your office, you have a person, even front desk person, knows that they're not supposed to plug it in. So they're going to let you know. Software engineer is not going to write the code just so that code works, but also so that code works as expected. So it's stable, so not a single person can abuse it. Obviously, mistakes happen all the time because as software engineers, we don't have that much time to focus only on security, but just keeping something in the back of your head that they may be potential security flaw helps a lot, because at least you may stop for a while and Google out a solution to your problem. You're not going to blindly write code and expect that it's safe. In my experience, most software engineers, especially junior software engineers, do not even consider security in the software development because they weren't ever taught about this. No one ever taught them there is such a thing as security. Security was something that security team was responsible for. So you have people writing code, and you have some QA testers and security testers that are supposed to test your application. It doesn't really scale, especially in agile world. For example, at Facebook, when they publish code a couple of hundreds of times each day, so good luck with manual testing of all those changes, right? Which is why you need to educate all your employees how to do that. So we could say that Secure SDLC is all about technology and automation, and DevSecOps is actually about this empathetic leadership while leading implementation of Secure SDLC. So you make sure that everyone understands why it's important. You educate them more than expected. And that's one of the greatest examples I may give for people that wonder why would I want to implement secure SDLC or DevSecOps. Because if you have a company that's hiring 100 software engineers and one security engineer because it's expensive, that person isn't producing anything. Security engineer isn't bringing any immediate ROI to the company. They're cost. They're just testing. They're not producing something a customer is going to pay for. But what security engineers are supposed to do is to minimize the cost of the data breach. So when something bad happens, they minimize the exposure. So you just pay lower penalties. They minimize the risks and all that stuff. But still, if you have 100 software engineers and one security engineer, it's tough. Which is why I cannot clone myself. All I can do is either hope, but like I said, that's not a great strategy, or I can teach other people, at least to some extent, how to help me. Yep.
So, how would you advise in a very young startup when time to market is like fundamental and you have to get out as soon as possible?
Right.
To start collecting feedback from users, how would you find the correct trade-off between agility and security?
That's a good question. And what DevSecOps is all about is making sure that security doesn't get into way of agile software development. So we build so many automated tools that scan your code on a continuous basis that you just cannot make a mistake that easily. Obviously, there are going to be there automated systems, obviously, but you decrease the risks. But that's a good question, to which practical answer we are going to see maybe in 10, 15 years, where every single software engineer is educated how to write code securely. Because if you write the code currently, I ask you, hey, so create this product. You focus on this builder mindset, right? You want to build a feature, deliver to customers. But if you knew already how to write code securely, it wouldn't be a problem, because natively, you would be writing this code securely. Currently, it takes a lot of time. If you're a startup, you join a startup, most likely 90% of people that work with you haven't heard about secure coding, right? If we had taken this approach 20 years ago, nowadays everyone would know about this, right? So it's reiteration. When I join a company, I teach 5 software engineers. They join 5 different companies. There is at least one person that knows how to code securely and propagate that knowledge to others. So one person at each company. If I'm working in software house that's hiring 100 software engineers, I teach all of them. Then I potentially have 100 companies that are much more secure. So obviously one person doesn't scale. If we had taken this approach in the past, it would be much easier, which is why it's going to be easier in the future. But how do you do this quickly? Like you write the software, you produce the product. There is a couple of resources that you can consume in a couple of minutes. So this is a handbook. It's 224 pages. That's long, obviously. That's expensive. So if we are talking about startup, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. This matters. So it's 15 pages of just check boxes with one sentence for each action item. So for example, you are building authorization mechanism. You're creating a landing page where users can log in. You navigate to this checklist and you have list of items that you should verify to make sure that it's secure. Obviously, that's still pain in the ass because it's manual work, right? Which is why you have automated systems that generate the checklist for you. That's easier, but it's not good enough in a startup environment, which is why you have all these fantastic tools that you can actually use to do all those things for you. So it's not going to give you as great coverage as you would receive if you had done this manually. But if your choice as a startup owner is, I either do it quickly or I don't do it at all, then 1% is better than 0, right? 1% of coverage is better than 0. So you just download any of those tools, you run them against your application, it's just a binary file, and you get something out of it. and you get remediation steps. So on each step of ESDLC, you have tools that you can plug in and actually secure your code. For example, here is a list of static code analysis that you can use, static code analysis tools to scan your code, not application, but your code. So you don't need to deploy this and wait for deployment to know if your application is secure. As you're writing and committing to GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, you get immediate feedback whether there is a potential security issue in the code. Modern technology, the same story. We have tools for that. Also, we have binaries that do that. Here's an example of Openstack Bandit, tool for scanning Python code. It's a binary. You point it to a folder with files with your source code. You point it to a specific file, and it gives you an output, actually output that's saying you, so here are the lines with vulnerable code, and here is why it's an issue. And you just go to the documentation, okay, so I should just change. And if you have any tests, if you are writing Selenium tests, WebDriver tests, anything like that, it takes you 5 lines of configuration to plug your test that you've already created into this previous tool, and it's going to scan your APIs for security issues. Because most dynamic application security testings are pretty dumb. They just crawl the application, they throw requests at random APIs, but they're not context aware. They don't know what this request is supposed to be doing. If you have your tests, functional tests that are testing application, how it works, this tool is learning, and it can provide you better feedback. So you embed it into CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and it's giving you an output. Each time you deploy an application, you give an info back. For young startup owner, I would recommend to go with some cloud solutions. For example, go with GitHub. And especially if you are building maybe open source software, or some part of this is open source, then there is a lot of tools, a lot of companies that offer a free subscription to the great service to scan your code for free. So there is solutions such as Snake.io, which is really expensive, but if you have open source project, you just provide your GitHub URL, and they scan your code base for free. They show you the potential security issues. They provide you an info about outdated libraries and all that stuff. If you, for example, build Docker images, if you use Docker, then you can use Docker Hub, which has all these tools already integrated, all these tools on the left side. So go with cloud. Cloud's better for that, essentially. That's what I'm trying to say. And if someone needs some specific tool, some custom tool for some specific technology, there's a bunch of them. So one of the most important resources is website OWASP.com, owasp.org. Open Application Security Project, huge organization, non-profit organization that's as a collective producing a lot of content for software engineers and other people working in IT, how to write code securely, how to make their code more secure. So you just go to that website and you have all those resources I've mentioned here. This one, huge guidelines showing you how you could do stuff better and much more secure. All these tools on the left side are open source as well. So that's cheap. Obviously, it's going to cost you time, but it's going to be safer. And it takes a couple of seconds to run any of those, and there's a bunch of those. So if you say, hey, but what about Angular? What about Redux? What about new technologies? We have tools for that. You just type in Google Angular security testing, and you get the binary files to test your application. That's really easy. That's really straightforward. If you are deploying in the cloud, then you also have tools that help you do that. Open source tools, most of them is open source. Those that are not open source are very expensive, so I don't recommend you to go with them as a startup owner, small startup owner, because Netflix is also called a startup and they can pay big bucks for security solutions. So those two tools are for GCP, Google Cloud Platform. For AWS, we have other tools. For Azure, we have other tools. We essentially have tools for any of those platforms, depending on how much time you want to invest in deploying all those. And then, what about manual security testing? Because people hang up on this often. Okay, so you are showing us all these automated tools, you are showing us education materials, but we all know that automation isn't possible, isn't capable of finding all security issues. And it's like, it's obvious, so why are you asking? We've been all doing manual security testing, but currently, in current world, especially in agile companies, there's simply no place for manual security testing alone. And if your choice is, I either ship something that's insecure or I ship something with lower coverage, then you should go with lower coverage and low cost of implementation, and not with manual testing that's very expensive or higher coverage, which you're not going to afford anyways. So obviously, if you have pair of eyes or hands available to test your application, use that. But if you don't have that, use automation. If you want to go to the next level and you used to do only manual testing, then do manual testing and automation. There is no such a thing like enough security assurance, and it never will be, I guess. So more stuff you put in is better. And I've showed you many tools. You just pick any, you are in troubles. If you've done something, you'll be punished. But I much more prefer to be punished with 1,000 euros than 10 million euros. So in the long run, it's much more cost effective to actually put in money and do some of those tools instead of hoping that they're not going to catch me. Because when they do catch me, and they will catch most companies, I hope so, because I'm tired of our privacy getting devastated online, many companies will go down, essentially. And I guess that's one of the most important things. If you want to do GDPR, do basics of GDPR of your company, don't get paralyzed that there are so many things to cover. Just do anything. Just do basics. And ask your people for help in DevSecOps spirit, like in DevOps. People work with each other, they help each other, do the same thing with security and privacy. So involve everyone and make it better. And if someone wants to reach out to us and ask for help, you're building a startup and you want to ask us, hey, so what are some of the custom tools for our situation? You hit me up. I'm not going to sell you anything. You can reach out to me. We can get on the phone, Skype, whatever you like. And I'm going to give you tools and guidance how to secure organizations, how to secure your product, application, infrastructure, whatever you want. Or if you want to just chat about stuff for 1 hour, you can also call me. So that's cool. I guess that's it. If you have any questions in terms of GDPR, product security, application security, we can go through that as well. Yeah, go on.
I have one question, which is more like a curiosity, because I was going through, okay, I've used Dropbox for like 2 years now.
Right.
Then I realized I wanted something more secure.
Yep.
And I found that Mega is maybe a safer solution than Dropbox.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't found any technical details. I know they sell it for end-to-end encryption, cloud storage, but it's not actually verified anywhere. And there are people saying, yeah, it's secure, people saying it's not secure. So if you have the chance to, I don't know, test it in different way, being
right.
Like
so what do you want to store there?
Sorry?
What are you going to be storing there? What do you need Dropbox for?
Well, basically most of the university stuff, documents, slides, projects which are not on Git, so like something else.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and for the most secure thing, for the most private things, I have another cloud service which is Sync, which I know is much more secure than Mega and Dropbox. So I store a small subset of the things on that cloud, but on all the other things like documents, kind of photos and everything.
Right. Do you have a Gmail account?
I have.
Awesome. Then use Google Drive.
Is it safer?
No. The other ones may invade your privacy. If you have a Gmail account, then Google is out of threat model. Google is such a huge organization that they have access to all the data in the world anyways. if you have a Gmail account, then how you register to Dropbox? With Gmail account.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if Google wants to invite your privacy, they can get into your Dropbox anyways. So if you already have a Gmail account, then use Google Drive, which is essentially the same thing. It's Google. If you put your data through Dropbox, now two organizations have access to your data, Google and Dropbox.
But that's why I chose to switch to Mega, because it's end-to-end encrypted, so there shouldn't be any way for Google to access my data without the private key, right?
Right. If you want to have end-to-end encryption, that's cool. The question for most people is, do you really need it? Like, why? Why do you need it? If you care that much about privacy, that's cool. Go with something that allows you for end-to-end encryption, and then definitely Dropbox for personal usage isn't the best solution. Dropbox allows you integration with HSMs, which is hardware security management platform that allows you to store your encryption keys. They don't have access to your data. They need to contact that hardware module and then fetch the keys and then decrypt the data. That's similar thing. For personal usage, they absolutely have this in clear. They tell you that they have this data encrypted at rest, so on their own server it's encrypted, but they still control the keys. So Mega is fine, Sync is fine.
So my question was, have you had a look at Mega? Can you tell it's secure? It's more secure than...
If you care about privacy,
it's
better.
I do a lot.
Yeah. If you care about general safety, it's like, not really. So for privacy, it's better. If you just want something so other people than the company you're hosting your data in have no access, then go with any company. So for example, if you don't want your boyfriend, girlfriend to have access to your data, then use any solution. That's going to be fine. If you don't want your girlfriend and boyfriend and that company have access to your data, use Mega. Yeah, they have bug bounty program. They have public reports with security pentest results. Kim was a guy that was a hacker himself, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, because I read they were sold to Chinese company, and then there were some doubts that it's actually secure and maybe Chinese government can access the data. So
with end-to-end encryption, there is no such way.
My question was if it's properly end-to-end encryption, or they're selling like end-to-end encryption, but it's not end-to-end.
If it wasn't end-to-end encryption and they kept telling that it is, they would get exposed pretty quickly. So you would know about this. Yeah. So when someone even mentions privacy, so hey, I have a product that provides you privacy, there are many people looking at that company immediately. Many ethical hackers, security researchers, and they are going after these companies because it's a challenge. So do you really provide that much privacy? So yeah.
Okay. Now let's have a second presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we switch?
Sure. Yes.
I have to leave.
I say it's your loss.
I'm really, 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 really sorry.
The mic is
Yes.
But feel free to stay in touch, though. So if you have
where
any
can I find the
questions.
slides and the info about the meetup?
they will be in the comments of the meetup.
Okay, so you're gonna post it afterwards.
I don't know if the presentation, but at least...
No.